Hello, RDs and RDs to be. Welcome to the RD Exam Ready podcast. I'm Zach Caseberg, your tutor, coach, and host of this podcast to help bring you along the path to pass the RD exam. And my biggest passion is to help RDs and RDs to be just like you to know how to effectively pass the CDR exam. And if that sounds like you, then hey, you're in the right place. All throughout my time recording, doing podcasts, working with students, I've discussed some of the tips for working with nutrition through the life cycle. And as of right now, October of 2025, when I'm recording this, I'm about to get my own dose of nutrition through the life cycle because my partner and I are about to have our first baby, which is super exciting. Literally, as I'm talking right now at this second, we're past our due date. So, literally, it's a really good time filler for me to work on and learn about infant nutrition, especially since this baby is just about to be here. This will be our topic today, so come learn along with me as we prepare for new babies and new exam attempts to come. Now, a baby is considered at term, a two term, at about 37 to 42 weeks. I have textbooks that say 37 weeks is full term. I have online resources that say 39 weeks. Just to be sure, so we don't get too confused about this, let's just make sure we stay consistent. And here's my advice. Full term, let's just call it between 37 and 42 weeks gestation. On questions on the exam, they're going to give you some dramatic differences from this. So if it was a question about a preterm infant, it would say an infant that was born at 32 or 36 weeks gestation. And now you know how to interpret that information in the question. Now, preterm and low birth weight infants are at much greater risk for infant mortality, for disability, than infants who are born at normal or full term birth weights. Now, it really all starts with assessment, doesn't it always? And you'll need to know how to read charts and assess a child's growth. So, you want to make sure you understand these charts and how to go about it. Key point here, RD to be big key point. It's recommended that healthcare providers use the World Health Organization's child growth standards to monitor growth in the first 2 years of life. So, from birth to 2 years old, you need to use the World Health Organization's growth standards to do this. That could be a question on the exam right there. Remember to use the WHO for newborns in up to 2 years, and after that point, you'll shift to the CDC growth standards. Babies and children up to two will have several growth standards that are being tracked to ensure proper growth. These can be confusing for students, and I'd like to run through these just to make sure we have them down. The first one is length for age. What you're comparing is the child's length while they're laying down compared to the age of infants at the same age. These are tracked in what's called percentiles. And what to remember about percentiles is that they indicate where this value falls compared to all others. So, a 50th percentile length for age, this would mean that the baby is average, 50th percentile, right in the middle. Their length is right in the middle, with half of the kids being longer than them and half of the kids being, well, shorter than them, as we could say. If a baby or if a kid is in the, let's say they're in the 90th percentile, then that would indicate that they are longer than 90% of all other kids. See, way up here. If the kiddo is in the 5th percentile, well, that means that they're only longer than 5% of all other kids. So a little bit on the low side there. Length for age is useful because guess what? Babies can't stand up. This is the reason we don't measure the height or stature of a baby is because, hey, they can't stand. So we measure their length. Length for age can be used to track overall nutrition status over the long term. In other words, it's good for tracking chronic nutrition status. Because what we should see is the baby become progressively longer as they continue to eat and continue to grow. But without proper nutrition, growth stunting can occur, which will impact how long these babies end up being. So that's why we use length for age as a nice little indicator to see, hey, is this baby growing at the same rate that they were before? If they're not, over several months, we're going to see that length for age really start to decrease there. The next one is going to be your weight for length. This is comparing the infant's weight compared to their length. I almost think of it as like baby BMI. Weight for length can help you differentiate between things like stunted growth, because if I see length for age really dramatically change over 3 months, probably is a good indicator of stunted growth. But if I notice that the weight for length seems normal, like we notice that they're pretty normal for their weight compared to this length, we might just be talking about a short kiddo here, and maybe it's not an issue of nutrition status. The next one is weight for age. Weight for age is measuring the child's weight compared to the other children at the same age. This is going to be a great indicator of acute changes in nutrition status. Because if a child at month 1 is tracking, let's say, in the 60th percentile for weight for age, so they're in the 60th percentile, they're heavier than 60% of all other kids, right? Let's say at month 2, they now are down to the 20th oh my gosh, the 25th percentile. We can see now that there's been a great reduction as to where they are on this chart. And so we can see that there's probably not getting enough nutrition because their weight has reduced so rapidly. Length wouldn't be as sensitive to those acute changes in nutrition status, and that's why that length for age is so much more helpful to be more of a chronic nutrition indicator. Another one here will also measure the baby's circumference for age compared to other children. However, I don't know what nutritional impacts to present on this for exam day, so just know that they do measure head circumference for age. If a baby is born the 10th percentile, or less than the 10th percentile, excuse me, for length, head circumference, or weight, they are considered small for gestational age. So if they do any of those three, low weight, low length, or low head circumference, they can be considered small for gestational age if any of those are below the 10th percentile. The other side of that scale is any of those above the 90th percentile. That is considered large for gestational age in that case. Okay, so make sure you know just those differences there. Now, let's go through energy and nutrient requirements for these infants, and we'll start with kcals here. In the first 6 months, infants require 108 kcals per kilogram of body weight. 108 aren't babies great. This can be our little trick to remembering those needs in the first 6 months. So they have really high calorie needs in those first 6 months. You and me, we might need about 25 kcals per kilogram. Babies, it's over 4 times that because they're growing so rapidly. Excuse me. Once we move on to 6 to 12 months, babies need 98 kcals per kilogram. Okay, so it drops down at that point. And I like 98 because it's very close to normal baby temperature. So 108 ain't that great for those first 6 months, but 98 is just a good temperature from 6 to 12 months that we want. So 98 kcals per kilogram is what we'll look for in that second 6 months. Then after 1 year old, you can use 102 kcals per kilogram as a reference, so just in between those two. To stick with these temperature ideas, if a kid gets above 1 years old, we notice, hey, maybe they start getting sick a lot more when they're around other kids. So maybe now that 102 is the number we're looking for, maybe this means a fever. Okay. So to review, 108 kcals per kilogram for the first 6 months, 98 kcals per kilogram for 6 to 12 months, and then back to 102 kcals per kilogram after 1 year. Now to the protein. From birth to 6 months old, babies should get right around 1.5 grams per kilogram of protein and about 1.2 grams per kilogram from the months 7 to 12. I would just say their protein needs are elevated compared to someone at the same weight. That's what we're kind of seeing there. They're growing, right? So they're going to need the adequate protein that they kind of require. And I've seen, minimums of like 9 to 11 grams of protein per day. So it really depends on the size of the kiddo, I would say. For fats, infants need to meet the adequate intake for fats. You don't need to know what that is for the exam, but it's right around 30 grams per day. In particular, what we should say is the baby needs to focus on getting adequate amounts of certain fats, essential fatty acids, like that of linoleic and alpha linoleic acids, DHA and EPA, as well as getting enough polyunsaturated fats because all of these are helping with cellular and brain development. Now, we need to shift gears because we're talking micronutrients, trace minerals, and all minerals, which I love to talk about. It gets really cool and differentiates between breastfeeding versus formula fed. So it's so cool here. Fluoride are naturally occurring mineral in water that helps us to prevent dental caries. Luckily, it does the same for babies. Infants can get fluoride from fluorinated water, bottles with fluoride, and from fluoride supplements. Breast milk itself is actually low in fluoride. So, if an infant lives in an area with fluorinated water, they typically don't need supplementation. But if their water is unfluorinated, they need to get supplemental fluoride. At birth, the DRI for fluoride is low. It's like zero point 0.1 milligrams per day. Then, when you get up to 7 to 12 months, it jumps to about zero point 0.5 milligrams per day. The minimum that I always saw is most fluoride supplements are about in a dose of 0.25 milligrams per dose, you could say. So that's kind of the minimum that they look for just to prevent that dental caries. Now, vitamin D, we know it's so important for things like bone mineralization and brain development, and it's recommended that all children meet the adequate intake that they're required to meet, which is 400 international units of vitamin D per day. Breast milk itself, it's low in vitamin D, but most infant formulas are fortified with it. So really, it's only if you're breastfeeding do you need to probably supplement with vitamin D because breast milk is low in it. So if you are breastfeeding, you must give your baby 400 IUs of vitamin D daily. And a lot of liquid supplements provide that amount. The one I bought does, for instance. If you're formula feeding, more than likely you don't need to supplement it because so many formulas are already fortified with it. Iron is my next favorite topic. I love to talk about this one. Anemia is at the greatest risk in this first year of life for kiddo, and the Institute of Medicine recommends that infants get about 0.27 milligrams per day of iron. Now, let's take a pause on that. What they base this number is based off of the iron content of breast milk and the amount of intake that an infant normally takes of breast milk. So, what they're basing that minimum is based off of the iron that's provided in breast milk. It's a very small amount, but it is some iron that's necessary for the baby. In the first 4 months, they usually say this is a okay, just rely on breast milk. But after that 4 months, they say, hey, it's time to start supplementing. And the supplement that they usually recommend is for babies just to get about 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight per day from iron. The supplement I'm going to be using around 4 months for my baby, it's about 11 milligrams in it, which is providing 100% of the baby's needs. But you can use that 1 milligram per kilogram per day reference, and that'll help you out too. We'll finish up here with feeding in early infancy. Exclusive breastfeeding is recommended in the first 6 months of life, and continuation for the second 6 months, in addition to some supplementary foods. I'm not going to waste our time going through all the benefits of breastfeeding that many of you already know. But one thing I will share is I once heard this from an educator that said a lot of the times they say breast is best, but another thing I heard from this educator, which is fed is best. So, growth and development is the priority. Even if that can't be provided from breast milk, you have to give the baby enough so that they can grow and develop. Most infant formulas provide right around 20 calories per ounce, and breast milk is also about 20 calories per ounce. So that would mean that if my baby, let's say they require 400 kcals per day, okay, let's say that's what they require for their amount of calories in a day. Well, then I would divide that by 20, and that's going to tell me how many ounces of breast milk that I need to provide per day, which would be what? About 20 ounces per day is what I would have to provide to the baby to meet their calorie needs. So that's just a good tip to take those total calories and take that to based off of how much ounces of breast milk or formula that baby needs to get. Oh, and remember, cow's milk, not recommended in the first year of life for the baby. Now that we've learned, now that we've gone through and taken in all this information, I'd really like you to come and apply it with me with these practice questions. We're going to start with number one and use process of elimination to help us along the way. Number one, a 5-month-old exclusively bred infant would require which of the following nutrition prescriptions? A, 98 kcals per kilogram per day, supplemental vitamin B12. B, 130 kcals per kilogram per day, supplemental vitamin D. C, 108 kcals per day, supplemental iron. Or D, 25 kcals per day with supplemental iron. Number one, a 5-month-old exclusively breastfed infant would require which of the following nutrition prescriptions? Let's eliminate and see which ones just don't fit here. For A, 98 kcals per day, supplemental B12. I don't know about you, but I kind of want to get rid of this one. The calories seem close maybe to the range that I might need, but the B12 felt off to me. I don't remember us talking about B12 today. I'm going to get rid of answer A. For B, 130 kcals per day in supplemental vitamin D. Well, vitamin D is good to supplement, but gosh, 130 kcals per day, it feels high. I would rule that out based on what I know about these numbers. 108 ain't baby's great. 108 kcals per day in supplemental iron. I think C would be a good fit for us, and I'm going to hold on to that one. Or D, 25 kcals per kilogram per day in supplemental iron. That feels way too low in the kcal department, so I would rule that one out. This means my best answer for number one will be answer C, 108 kcals per day in supplemental iron for an exclusively breastfed 5-month-old. Great job on that one working with me. Let's do the same for number two. An infant who is 8 months old and is 18 pounds would require how many kcals per day? Ooh, this is a fun one, a little math one for us to do together, right? So let's make sure we have our calculators out to help us out with this one here. We have an 8-month-old and they're 18 pounds. How many kcals would they require? The first thing you need to ask yourself, RD, is how many kcals per day will this child need? Well, we know it started with 108 kcals per day, 108 kcals per kilogram per day for the first 6 months. What was it for a baby that's 6 to 12 months? Well, it was 98 kcals per kilogram per day, right? That was our number. The baby is 18 pounds, so let's find out what they would be as far as their kilograms of weight. In order to do that, you would divide 18 divided by 2.2 in order to get your kilograms of weight. When I did 18 divided by 2.2, I got 8.2 kilograms in that case. Now you need to take your kilograms and multiply that by how many kcals per kilogram they should get per day. So multiply that by 98 to get your answer. Let's look at this one here. For answer A, it says 369 kcals. Was that the answer that you got? I got something just a little bit different, much higher there. I'm going to rule out answer A. I don't think that's it. For B, 890. Okay, that's a little closer to what I got. C is 802, which is really close to what I got. And D is 108. So when I did that multiplication with URD to B, I came out to right around 803 kcals per day. When I look at these four answers, 369, 890, 802, or 108, I would say my best answer would be 802 calories per day because 890 would be way too high, and all the other answers were just way too low. So, answer C would be my best fit for number two. Final one here, number three. A 1 year old infant should be assessed for long term nutrition status using what? A. The World Health Organization weight for age. B. CDC BMI for age. C. CDC stature for age. Or D. World Health Organization length for age. A 1 year old infant should be assessed for long term nutrition status using which of these following? Let's see. A. The World Health Organization weight for age. Well, I know that we need to use the WHO as our growth standards for the first 2 years of life, and we're talking about a 1 year old. I think I'm going to hold on to this for right now. B. CDC BMI for age. Well, we're not using the CDC for our growth standards at the age of 1. So actually, I need to rule out number B, answer B. And then for C, CDC stature for age, this is way off because one, we're not using the CDC as our reference for growth standards. And two, stature isn't going to work because 1 year olds don't stand up all that well, or at least don't stand too straight. D is the World Health Organization length for age, which I think is also a good answer. So right now I'm stuck between weight for age and length for age. Which one of those did we say would be better for long term nutrition status? Remember, that would be your length for age from the WHO, because length for age is actually going to show us how their stunting or their growth is being affected by nutrition status. So I would say D is my best answer for that one. That wraps up today's lesson, students. I hope you listened, learned, and enjoyed, and really just enjoyed kind of digging in today with us. Remember, passing this exam is a journey, and we all need assistance along the way. Do yourself, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and tell other students who are studying just to help spread the word. One note I'll also make, if you're listening to this live in 2025, I'm probably not going to do a podcast next week just because I'm going to be caring for this newborn that's going to be coming into my life. So if you don't see anything, listen to some old episodes if you can. And if you're listening at a later date, then hey, hopefully I'll have some new stuff for you by that point. Always remember, happy studying to you, RD to be.